Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our third virtual workshop of the year. We're pleased to provide election information directly to you, our Maricopa County voters. My name is Betty Galanter, and I'm the Voter Outreach Manager for the Maricopa County elections. Now, today's topic is accessible voting. Our elections directors, Scott Jarrett and Ray Valenzuela, will share how Maricopa County elections and the Office of the Recorder provide ways that voters with disabilities can vote privately and independently, whether voting early by mail, early in person, voting in person on election day at an accessible voting location, or requesting voter assistance services. So here's our agenda. First, Ray Valenzuela will take about 15 minutes talking about mail-in voting and our special election boards where a voter can request voting assistance. Then Scott will take the next 15 minutes to share ways in which voters with disability can vote in person early or on election day. And then we're going to have 15 minutes with a live Q&A session with Scott and Ray, moderated by our communications manager, Matt Roberts. You can submit your questions. Simply type out your question below the live video here and click submit. We are going to try to answer as many questions that we can during our time together this morning. But all of your questions will be answered for viewing once we upload this video on our site. And you can find this video and all of our other videos by simply going to videos.maricopa.vote. But I want to introduce our host today. So we have Scott Jarrett, who's been with Maricopa County Elections, the Department of the Board of Supervisors, for over 4 years. He currently serves as the elections director responsible for directing all in-person voting, tabulation operations, candidate filing, campaign finance, and warehouse operations. And Scott works very closely with the Maricopa County Recorder, Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and he reports to the Maricopa County Manager. Ray Valenzuela has been working in the field of elections for over 33 years. He currently serves as the Director of Mail-in Voting and Election Services for Maricopa County. Ray serves or has served on various election-related panels for numerous organizations, and he is a certified elections registration administrator, graduate of the professional education program from Auburn University and the Elections Center. Ray reports to the Maricopa County Recorder, and both Ray and Scott work closely together each day to serve over our 2.5 million registered voters in the country and in the county. And we would like to thank our partners at Ability 360, who kindly allowed us to tape the event portion that you'll see here in the workshop at their Phoenix campus. Ability 360 is a nonprofit corporation that offers and promotes numerous programs designed to empower people with disabilities so they may achieve or continue independent lifestyles within the community. They have more than 130 staff members, 2,500 personal care attendants, and hundreds of volunteers. They provide services throughout Maricopa, Pima, Pinal, and Gila counties. And today, we're going to be accompanied by 3 peer mentor volunteers from Ability 360 who are going to demonstrate the election equipment. So a few reminders. This presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to our website for future viewing at videos.maricopa.vote. You can submit your questions at any time. We have cart captioning today provided by Tracy, and we also have 2 American Sign Language interpreters, Amy and Sydney. So I do want to welcome Amy, Tracy, and Sydney. So with that, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to our Scott and Ray election directors at the Ability 360 campus.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today on our third virtual workshop of 2023. So in our first virtual workshop, we went into our ballot tabulation center where we covered all the layers of checks and balances that we had throughout the central count environment. In our second virtual workshop, we visited one of our in-person voting locations, a vote center, where we went through and took you inside so you can see how the in-person voting process worked. And today we're going to go and be providing details on the different options that we provide to voters that may have a disability as they're participating in the voting process. And there's no better place actually to go through and describe these details than with one of our community partners, Ability 360. With Ray's vast amount of experience with our elections department, he can describe better some of the benefits of that partnership.
Absolutely. Ability 360 has been a partner for many, many years. We have utilized them for both voting facilities. More importantly, we utilize them for focus groups for when we have new equipment, new accessible devices. We want to be able to hit the community and get that community to be participatory in it. So Ability 360 has been a very, very solid partner for us in this process.
And me being the head of in-person voting and all of the technology that we introduce into those voting locations. So as Ray described, having the feedback from the community, especially those that have a disability, that they can tell us how that equipment works and where we can make improvements about our processes to serve those voters best. So this is a great partnership. So they have provided us a copy, our Ability 360 has provided us a copy of their mission, and I don't want to mess that up, so I'm actually going to read it. So Ability 360 is a nonprofit organization providing services for persons with disabilities in Maricopa, Pinal, and Gila counties. Ability 360's mission is to offer and promote programs designed to empower people with disabilities so that they may achieve or continue independent lifestyles with the community. Programs include independent living skills, instruction, home care services, employment search, and recreation at their full accessible sports and fitness center. And then you can go to, for more information, www.ability360.org or org. So before we get into those voting options for voters with disabilities, we do want to cover some overarching concepts that every election official should understand. And these are concepts that we actually provide training to our poll workers so they understand when we're serving voters in Maricopa County. And the first concept is that every voter should have the option to choose how they want to participate, whether that's through the early voting process or the in-person voting process, and that they have a courteous and respectful voting experience. So that's a major concept that we want to make sure that resonates with our staff as we're serving voters with disabilities. The second concept is that some voters that may have a disability, it may not be evident or visible. So we should not assume whether a voter has a disability or not. And if someone asks for accommodation, we should not question that accommodation. We should work to serve that voter and provide the need, make sure that we're serving their needs. And then the third concept is just because a voter does have a disability, we should not assume that they need assistance, right? So we can offer assistance and let them know we're here to serve you, and then work with them on their specific needs, make sure that we're listening to their requests for those accommodations. So now that we've covered those concepts, we're going to go through and to discuss some of the options that a voter with a disability has through the early voting process. So I'm going to let Ray cover that, and I'm going to go get ready to then describe in detail some of our in-person voting options. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Scott. Well, Scott's getting ready for the in-person part. We'll speak to the early voting process that's specific to the accessible and community that needs accessible options. Before we do, I just want to mention that the Elections Department is in line with Ability 360's mission, where we're looking to provide for that independent involvement, independent voting. One of those is through the mail ballot process. Majority of our folks that probably have an accessibility issue or disability issue utilize the mail ballot, which I'm holding in front of me, the green affidavit, carrier envelope. And why I mention that is because it is an option where a voter can choose to have this mailed to them and choose a person of their preference, spouse, roommate, whatever it may be, to assist them with voting. So it doesn't require a bipartisan board to assist. We can mail this to the voter, and they can, through request.maricopa.vote, make that option for a mail ballot and also what we call a special election board ballot, SEB, and I'll speak a little bit to that. But I want to focus on the mail ballot because it is the largest segment of how most accessible voters utilize this process to allow for voting. And the why I'm focusing on this is not so much that it's, this is used by 1.9 million voters in the past 2020 election, but I want to point and focus on two things specific to this agenda and this community. And that is that there is on this envelope a section for a phone number. Why I'm noting that is this does not go on your record, but we ask that you give us a phone number. Why? Because specific to this community, there are some times where the signature has matured or possibly degraded. And then this is your proof of identity. If we don't have that signature, or your signature is now a mark, using that as an example, we may need to contact you to verify your identity. So that's a very important part for all voters, but also for this community. Secondarily to this is there's a section required by law that if somebody assists you with marking your ballot, they would identify themselves here. So, but in this section, a lot of people misunderstand that to be somebody's assisting you with signing. It actually says power of attorney, you cannot proxy over your signature. So if you are using this method, we want to point out that make your signature as it is. If it's a mark, then so be it. We will likely have that on file, or we can contact you to get an updated signature, whatever that may be, so that in the future we have something to match to. So I want to point that out, and we'll talk a little bit about updating voter registration as we get to the next option, which is special election boards. Special election boards are built into statute, into law, and they're bipartisan boards that actually will come out to individuals that have physical limitations, inability to get to a polling place, and as I mentioned, Scott will talk about in-person, independent, accessible voting options. But let's say you can't get there or you have a physical inability, our special election board program is designed to actually allow you to request this bipartisan board to come out and physically assist you with marking your ballot and casting that so that we can get that into the mix and into the count. One of the things that's special about that, on top of the fact that, as an example, 2022, we had over 900 voters utilize a process by which we had Braille ballots mailed to them, 37 to be exact, 503 ballots that were cast as large print, and over 300 that were these special election boards visiting individuals at their home, nursing facilities, veterans facilities. We have over 1,300 facilities that we partner with to be able to offer these services. And if you're wanting this service, again, you can contact us. I'll give you the number now, and at the end as well. It's 602-506-1511, and that's a number where you can, or go to maricopa.vote, and you'll see that we have some frequently asked questions on that. Segue a little bit over to the alternate format. We do offer, as I mentioned, large print ballots. This allows you then, for somebody who maybe has low vision or sight impaired, but can still see, then we can offer these larger print ballots that accommodate for the voter to actually cast this, for us to actually mail it to you, here's the large envelope, and for you to then to independently participate in the process through the mail without having to get the regular version of the ballot. In addition to, let me step over here, we have our Braille ballots. Again, mentioned that we had 37 of these, and although 900 doesn't seem like a lot of ballots cast through this accessible process, when you talk about 1.3 million ballots cast, it still is in line with our motto. Every vote counts. So we want you to have that ability to cast a ballot. So we do offer Braille ballots. Now they are pretty thick because some of our ballots are pretty large, but these too can be mailed to a voter upon request. So these are options that we offer to the voter. These are options that in addition to, as I mentioned, voter registration, if you have to update your signature, you can contact us. This special election board, two-member board, bipartisan, can come out and assist you with completing a registration or updating your registration, example, to update your signature so that we have that on file as an example. So again, a lot of great features that, again, align with mission for Ability 360 and us to serve the voter of this community and offer these accessible options. So I will now turn it over to Scott Jarrett, who's outside waiting for curbside voting, which begins the process of in-person voting and one of the accessible options for that process.
Okay, well, thank you, Ray. So here we are outside of one of our voting locations, and I actually have in my hand our 2022 training manual. And this is a manual that we provide to all of our poll workers that are going to be serving in our voting locations. And it's a very thick manual that has a lot of different concepts, but there's a few items that discuss how we serve voters with disabilities. And one of those very first options that voters would have is actually to participate in the comfort of their car. So through something that we call curbside voting. I'm actually standing outside the voting location next to one of our curbside voting signs. Now, for a voter that would be wanting to participate in this process, these are usually located in the closest parking spots to our voting location. So we post all of our voting locations online, and we usually place those voting locations every 1 to 2 miles. And many of those voting locations are very close to public transportation options. So over 3/4 of them, or in 2022, were within less than a mile of a bus stop or a light rail stop. But we then also measured how many were within 1/4 of a mile, and approximately 60, just over 60 of our voting locations were within 1/4 of a mile to a light rail or bus stop. But for those voters that are driving to one of our voting locations, or they have someone that's driving them to the voting location, they have this option of curbside voting. And so we have this sign. It will have a phone number, which we're currently blurring out. But those voters can then use that phone number to call into our central count facility. We'll have a command center there that will answer that phone, and then our command center can call back to the voting location itself, speak with the inspector of one of our poll workers, and let them know that there's a voter needing assistance outside that would like to participate in curbside voting. At that point in time, we'll have one of our marshals that will go out and then have that voter sign an affidavit, provide us some of that information that we would then be able to provide them their specific ballot style. So in an August primary, we could have over 18,000 different ballot styles. In a November general election, close to 12,000 different ballot styles. So we'll need that information so the marshal can go inside. They'll meet with another poll worker of a different party. They'll log in and check that voter in to our Sitebook check-in station, and then they will be able to print that specific ballot for that voter. And then we'll send out 2 poll workers of different parties to provide that voter with that ballot. It'll come in a secrecy envelope, and then that voter can fill out that ballot in the comfort of their car, and then provide that to our poll workers, again, a team of 2 different poll workers of different parties, coming in and bringing that into our voting location. It's during early voting, it'll be an affidavit envelope that gets put into a drop box. If it's on election day, it'll be actually a live ballot in that secrecy envelope that can go directly into the tabulator. But that entire process is administered, and the oversight is by 2 different poll workers of different parties. Okay, now that we've talked about curbside voting, we've talked about other options for in-person voting, and we're going to do that as we go into our voting location. So if you'll follow me. So one of those options is to provide assistance for those voters, right? So, and who can assist a voter? And this is any voter, but also voters with disabilities. And we'll describe this more as we go inside the voting location. So as far as assistance that can be provided to a voter, so a voter can actually bring in someone who may be a family member or a friend that can assist them. Now there are some restrictions on who a voter can bring in to provide that assistance. They cannot be a candidate on the ballot, or they cannot be an employer, right? And because both that candidate on the ballot and or the employer could have potentially undue influence over the voter as they're completing the ballot. But if a voter does not bring in someone to assist them, they could then ask for that assistance from our poll workers. Now there also are some restrictions related to that if our poll workers are providing that assistance. And those restrictions are that it has to be a team of 2 poll workers, and those poll workers have to be of differing parties. So a Republican and a Democrat and a Libertarian, Republican and a Libertarian, that then provide that assistance to that voter. Now, when we say assistance, that assistance is specific to each individual voter, and that voter is asking for that assistance or that accommodations. And so we need to be very clear on understanding what it is that that voter is asking for, and not assuming that we would know the assistance that the voter is requesting. So it's very clear that we're communicating with that voter and then allowing them to guide us through the assistance that we would be providing. So in addition to assistance, we do offer a few other options for a voter that may have a disability to participate in the process and do that independently. So one of those is to use an accessible voting device. So our accessible voting devices are part of our tabulation equipment, and they're devices that go through federal and state certification. So what a voter would do is they would check in using our standard check-in process. So that is our site book, and I'm going to demonstrate that now. So it's going to be a touch screen. So this would allow the voter to continue through the check-in process, and then we have this selection here. I wish to use an accessible voting device. So the voter would either touch this or ask for assistance from our poll worker to complete this process. And then you'd select, I would like to use the accessible voting device. And here it's asking, you are requesting to use the accessible voting device and you'll need some assistance. So this would be from one of our poll workers. They'll come over, they'll have a specific badge. They're allowed to then progress through the process. And then here's just a screen that prompts them to confirm that they're wanting to use the accessible voting device. And there's a green button here that they would select. I wish to use the accessible voting device. And then they'll continue through the check-in process, which we've demonstrated in our prior workshop. So we're going to go ahead and move on to actually demonstrating the accessible voting device itself. So these would be the materials that would be printed if a voter wanted to use the accessible voting device. So, and one of the important pieces is this accessible voting device activation form. So this is what the poll worker is going to need to make sure that they print that unique specific ballot style for that voter that's using the device. So they'll have this will print from one of our ballot on demand printers. The poll worker will take this information, they'll escort the voter to the accessible voting device, and here we are. It's basically a touch screen device that provides several different options. The voter can use the touch screen, or they can use this remote control, which we call an ATI, or Audio Tactical Interface device, that would allow them to progress through the process, even using auditory, or these headphones for auditory assistance, and or if a voter brings in their own sip and puff device that allow them to move and progress through voting the ballot by themselves. So we're going to show how to activate the ballot. So a poll worker is going to have this card assigned to them. So the poll worker would go and insert this card into the device. They're going to select activate the ballot. Again, then this code is going to be the code that the poll worker enters to activate this ballot. So it's going to be, and it's printed on the sheet. And then if the voter wants to use the ATI device or the audio, the poll worker will need to enable the controller. Otherwise, it will only serve as a touchscreen device. We have every single one of our ballot styles that is loaded onto this device. So it just takes a minute to pull up that specific ballot style. And now it then allows the voter to select their preferred language, whether that's English or Spanish. So here we'll demonstrate the English. So selecting English, there is, if the voter wants to change, they're able to do that, and I'll demonstrate that as we go through. But here, if it allows them to select which device that they'd want to use, whether that's the ATI device or the SIP Puff. We're going to go ahead and select the ATI device. So here's some instructions on the screen that'll guide the voter on how to use the device. So it allows them to go left, right, up, or down as they're moving through, progressing through the ballot, or this red button to select and make a selection. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the select, and it allows us to progress. And here's one of our training ballots. So it's our, what we call our famous names ballots, and we use it to provide training to our poll workers and demonstrations such as this. So this is our demonstration ballot. They have the right ballot, and then they can either go next and then select, or they can use these touchscreen devices on the bottom of the screen, or they can make selections up here. Now, there's a few things I'd like to show you. As I mentioned, they could change the selection to Spanish here if they wanted to. I'll leave it as English. They can also change the text size, so to the normal size, or make it much bigger to make it easier for someone to use. So if they select the big, it'll load, and then it's much easier to see on the screen. They can also change the view, and that view can either be black on white, it can be white on black, or we can go back to the color, the normal. So as the voter would progress through, there's a couple control points. So this will allow the voter and notify them if they've missed a contest. It also won't let them overvote a contest. So sometimes when a voter is completing their ballot, it's a vote for one, you're only able to select one, but voters fill in multiple ovals. The accessible voting device actually won't allow that to happen. It won't let the voter to progress to the next contest. It will warn them that they've overvoted this contest, and then they can go back and make the appropriate selection. It will allow for a voter, they don't have to fill in every single contest on the ballot, but as they progress through, at the very end of the process, it will allow them to review, and then it actually prints out a hard copy ballot. So this is a paper ballot that is what gets inserted into the tabulator and ultimately tabulated, and it will show all the selections for each of the contests on the ballot that the voter selected. So they have that opportunity to review this one more time. And if they did make a mistake or they inadvertently selected a candidate that they didn't want to vote for, then that voter would have that opportunity to spoil this ballot, then recheck in, get a new activation code, and then we can print. They can go through this process again and print a new ballot. Other options for a voter inside our in-person voting options are at our voting booths themselves. So we have two different booths here. One is our standard voting booth, which is much higher than our accessible voting booth. Right, this is much lower to the ground. So if a voter did come in with a wheelchair, it just makes it easier for them to be able to use this booth in their own privacy, right? So we have the same privacy screens in both. We also have the instructions that are available for the voter, so then they can, if they choose to, complete this ballot by themselves in the privacy of their own. Now they'll be able to complete this ballot and then be able to insert that ballot. So we're demonstrating early voting. They'd be able to take that ballot, insert it into that affidavit envelope that was printed, and then ultimately into our drop box. Now again, if that voter wants assistance in completing this ballot, our poll workers are able to do that. Again, they'd have to be members of two different parties, and they could even provide that assistance in putting the ballot into that affidavit envelope itself. So then the voter would take this affidavit envelope and walk over to our ballot drop box, and then be able to insert it here into our drop box. And then this, at the end of election night, would then be brought back to our central count facility to be tabulated there.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you to Ability 360 for allowing us to present our in-person accessible options as well as our early voting accessible options to include the special election boards. Again, we are one mission to ensure that we're giving this specific community the ability to independently participate if they so choose, or have the options for these other services through bipartisan boards. So we will go ahead and send it back to Betty, and we will be answering some questions back at our tabulation center.
Wow, what great information. Thank you so much, Scott and Ray. And we hope you enjoyed watching the video on accessible voting. So now we have time to answer your questions. I'm going to turn it over to our panel with Scott and Ray for that Q&A, moderated by Matt Roberts. Matt?
Thanks, Betty, and thanks, guys, for making the trip back down to MECTEC while you were going through some of that presentation. Terrific presentation, by the way. Thank you for that. We got this question that everybody can see, and it's for you, Ray. And it talks a little bit about how Braille ballots are tabulated. It's one piece that I think some people don't understand.
Yeah, it's a great question, always, again, very intuitive audience. The fact is, we showed about that you can request a Braille ballot. We can mail it to you to allow for that independent voting. Again, I mentioned 37 Braille ballots were cast in the past election. Not a large volume, but it's enough to allow for that. When they come back, they're treated just like any other mail ballot, if you will. The signature verification is done on the larger affidavit, and that's another key point that, again, want to make sure the voter is aware that they can get assistance, but they need to sign that or make their mark, whatever that may be. So that if we have that on file, we will verify that. And then it goes to a citizen board of differing parties. So everywhere you'll see when we talk about boards, they're always made up of differing parties. So that question is, how is it, it's duplicated. Obviously the machine won't read a Braille ballot, so we bring in individuals from the disability community that are able to read Braille, and they're of differing parties. So example, Dem, a rep, a libertarian, whatever that may be, and those individuals will form that board. They will read off in unison to compare that they're reading that Braille ballot correctly, and we will dupe it to a regular ballot that can be tabulated. So.
And so those Braille ballots, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I just wanted to make sure that the viewers know, we will take a serial number. So when the duplication board is duplicating that ballot, they take and they put like a marrying number on the original ballot, and then they put that on the duplicated ballot as well, so they can always be tied back together. So that's what ensures sort of that chain of custody, and that we've duplicated exactly as the voter voted it.
And that's true for all duplicated ballots.
Yes,
So thank you
right.
for bringing that up, so that for that checks and balances, whether it's a regular ballot that's been damaged that needs to be duplicated, those serial marrying numbers are presented so that we can come back and reconcile it if we have.
And that happens right here in our facility under the live stream cameras, the same as any other ballot.
That's correct.
Okay. Scott, the next question we have comes from our chat, and it looks like it's for you, and it's on Election Day. How easy is it for a voter who uses a wheelchair to access our accessible voting device?
Well, I would say not just on Election Day, anytime we're offering in-person voting, we've gone through and we have a facility acquisition team, and they go out and do inspections on all of our facilities. And one of the things that they are looking for is to make sure that the facility would be accessible to an individual in a wheelchair. So they're looking at even the handles, right, on the doors, and if they need to add an accommodation to that or an adjustment so that the handle is easier to open, they'll do that. If the parking lot does not have a ramp, we have ramps stored in our warehouse that we can add those. We also then, in the layout of our voting location, we make sure that there's enough room for a wheelchair to be able to move freely within the voting location. But upon check-in, so it's very easy. So right when that voter is going to check into the process, as was demonstrated on the video, we have what we call our site book check-in stations. They're an e-poll book as defined in statute, but there's an option for that voter to select that they want to use that accessible voting device, and then our poll worker would walk that voter through the next steps of the process, guide that voter to then the accessible voting device, and then it's very intuitive for them to be able to use that device. But there will be a poll worker there to assist them if they had any questions as they went through that process. But that device, the accessible voting device, is able to be used solely by that voter so they can complete their ballot in secret, right? So they don't have to have that assistance from the poll worker.
Thanks. Next question from the chat relates to the accessibility factor and who actually then can request one of the SEV boards. So the question was, I have a family member who would not classify as a person with a disability, but is elderly. Can they use the services of an SEV?
The SEB, as outlined, is specifically to assist somebody with the physical limitations, or they are confined, example, hospital. They can't get out to get to the point place, and they maybe not so much physical disability, but the physical limitation is a requirement. So SEBs in and of itself is not to deliver the ballot, but to that point, the question is, well, my mother is older and she doesn't drive anymore, but that doesn't mean that she can't vote independently. So that's where probably the largest percentage of our mail-out ballots, or the largest percentage of elections ballots cast, are through the mail ballot process. So that individual could request a ballot at request.maricopa.vote. I'll continually plug
the site, yes.
But can make that request for a regular ballot. And that ballot can be mailed to them. They can vote at the convenience of their home. And the add-on to that, and I have part of the presentation where somebody else can assist them. So you could have a family member. You could have a son, daughter, caregiver that can assist you. It doesn't have to be a differing board. We send individuals on the SEB team as differing parties because of the checks and balances. But if you have somebody you wish to assist you, you can request a ballot by mail. You can request a ballot by mail and have it be Braille, because that's what you prefer, and vote independently. Have it be large print, and then vote independently, or have it be a standard ballot, which may then entail that you need some assistance. Then you can have somebody of your choosing. But the SEB is reserved for somebody with physical limitations that needs that assistance, or somebody confined, such as in the hospital.
Yeah, not from the chat, but as I'm listening to that, I know we have a lot of deadlines related to when and how quickly we have to have ballots back. Are there timelines for SEB boards as well, that you would have to request one to have come and visit you?
Yeah, Matt, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Giving compliments to all the public, but thank you, Matt, because yes, it is. The deadlines fall so that, for the most part, it's a mailing deadline. So E-11 or 11 days prior to an election is the last day by 5 p.m. to request a ballot, whether it's requesting it to be mailed, requesting it to be SEB team to come out. All of those fall into that deadline, 11 days prior. Now, we do have a statute that allows for emergency, and Scott oversees that. And emergency voting is something unexpected. You didn't want a mail ballot, you were planning on going in person on Tuesday, but on Friday you were hospitalized. Then that does lend itself to be the special election board process teams will be converted into emergency and can assist, but that is on a first come, first served basis. So that's why it's limited, where if we got 1,000 calls and we only have 10 boards, we may not be able to accommodate. But for the most part, it's 11 days prior by 5 p.m.
And one thing for our viewers to know is we have very good relationships with the political parties. And it's those parties that will provide us those special election boards or SEB board members that will staff that. So usually it's the county chairs that will provide those appointments. And so that through that partnership, we're able to accommodate more of those last minute requests. But a good point for what Ray's saying is it is on a first come, first served basis if it's made after that 11th day before election day.
And to make sure I understand it, if someone was interested in participating in one of these important boards, contact their political party to see how they can also get involved?
Yeah, so they can either apply through getinvolved.maricopa.vote, and we could hire them for one of those special boards. But yes, they could also contact their county political party and then get appointed that way as well.
Okay. I think we're going to stick with you for this next question, and it relates to the vote center. And are service dogs allowed in a vote center? Comes from our chat.
So, well, more than just service dogs. So yes, service pets are allowed to go into a voting location or a vote center to assist that voter. Now, most service animals are very, very well trained. But if there were a situation where one of those service animals was being a little bit disruptive, our poll workers may ask that voter then to utilize curbside voting, and then we can serve that voter through that curbside process. But yes, a service animal is allowed within a voting location as the voter progresses through the voting process.
The next question we see is a little bit related to what we previously talked about in terms of temporary workers and staff to serve on these special election boards. Is there training, and if someone that wasn't previously involved or had the experience with special election boards, do they come here or have a training program to help them understand the process and then be able to work with people with disabilities in an effective way?
Absolutely. And again, to hammer back the fact of how do I participate, get involved, .maricopa.vote speaks to some of those roles. But the key thing is getting those political partisanship, the differing parties. So definitely talk to your political party, get us, because the more we have, the more we can serve. But when we do get those appointments, we do a thorough training, because there's a lot of things that go in, and part of the video when we talk about how you communicate. And not to be facetious, but you don't yell because somebody is blind. There's some of those misnomers out there so we do a training. We provide that assistive expertise that we have on staff that we built out, and provide that to those boards that will go out to serve this community.
Okay. Scott, back to you, because vote centers, do they have ramps for wheelchair users?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier on the questions was our facilities acquisition team, as they're doing those inspections, we do our best to try to find voting locations that already have that wheelchair accessibility or those ramps. But there are a few locations where we know that we need a location to serve the community. It's ideal, I mentioned in the video, we had voting locations usually every 1 to 2 miles. So we might have a gap where we need a voting location, but it may not be ideal, maybe the parking lot, how it transitions into the voting location. So we do store those ramps in our warehouse for those specific situations so we can make it wheelchair accessible.
I think we only have time for a couple more questions, and I can see in the chat right now, Ray, this is for you. Can the SEB team assist with voter registration? You talked about participation, but what about registration?
Absolutely. That's one of the foundational things is, as we mentioned, I need your signature. So I need a signature to compare to for whether it's mail ballot or it's a SEB team, and you're making your mark. So one of the forefront is I'm now newly residing in this assistive living home. So I want to register here. So we can, as part of our process, bring out that SEB team to assist somebody with physically completing that registration, capturing that new updated signature, again, matured signature, degraded signature, whatever they may be or mark. But yes, we can indeed use that process, and will use that process upon request. And again, you can do that through calling our phone number, our call center, 602-506-1511. That's the best option because it does allow you to ask those questions. I need registration, or I need the special election board, or through request.maricopa.vote, where it's ballot request driven, and you can ask for regular or that accessible SEB team.
Okay, quick fire question for Scott. How does a voter with low vision know that their ballot was successfully inserted into the precinct tabulator?
Yes, so on election day, when we are using that on-site precinct-based tabulator, one of our poll workers would guide that voter over to those precinct-based tabulators. Those are staffed by a poll worker for all voters. But we train our poll workers to look for, there's a green check mark on that vote center tabulator that will say that the ballot's been accepted, and there's a little sound that's made when that ballot is dropped in. It's like dee dee, a little sound sort of like that. I don't know if I did the best impression. Dee dee. But that would be the indication that the ballot was cast successfully. But the poll worker then, if that was accommodation that was requested, that they wanted the poll worker's assistance, they could then guide and say, okay, now the ballot, the green check mark has been displayed on the screen and was accompanied by that sound.
And if I may segue off that, because when I mentioned that somebody can assist you, it doesn't have to be an SEB team. Not only can they assist you at home, but you can have a person of your choosing assist you in person, or 2 members of differing party are set up at the in-person voting to assist you with also, if you don't want to use the accessible device, you want a marked ballot, and assist you in taking that, to cast that, to hear that. What was that sound again? No, you don't have to do it. But again, there is assistive services both in person and for the SEB process.
Well, once again, great information in our continuing virtual workshop series. Stay tuned. We're going to have another one later this year. For Scott Jarrett and Ray Valenzuela, I'm Matt Roberts, and we'll kick it back to Betty.
Thank you so much, Scott, Ray, and Matt. And that is all the time that we have today. We hope that you found our time together very beneficial. Remember, you can view this and any of our previous virtual workshops by going to videos.maricopa.vote. You can find all of our workshops there, as well as the Election Connection video shorts hosted by Scott and Ray, and a variety of 2-minute election topics hosted by our very own mascot, Fill the Ballot. Our next workshop is going to be held on October 4th, so mark your calendar. And that topic is going to be about vote centers and how to get involved in elections. I'm going to send you an invitation to RSVP for that workshop about 3 to 4 weeks prior. So remember, if you want to stay informed, go to our website, elections.maricopa.gov. Lots of great information there. You can subscribe to our monthly newsletter if you haven't already. Just the Facts by going to justthefacts.vote. And I encourage you to also view BeBallotReady.vote. You can view your personalized voter dashboard. It is your one-stop shop for all things elections. And we want to hear from you. So please take a moment to fill out the online survey card that I will send you if you provided your email, and let us know how we're doing. Join us next time on October 4th for our 4th virtual workshop of the year on vote centers and how to get involved in elections. And many thanks to Scott, Ray, Matt, and to all of our election team members behind the scenes to make this workshop possible. And a very special thanks to all of our friends at Ability 360. So from all of us here at Maricopa County Elections and the Recorder's Office, thank you for attending and have a great day.